Hello and welcome back to the Flour Barn Homestead. I'm Lily, and if you're new here, I have owned, along with my sister and my dad, the Flour Barn Bakery for about 5 years now. We are a micro bakery that sits on our family farm, and we are only open on Fridays and Saturdays. We sell things like cinnamon rolls, pastries, croissants, cake, and a variety of items. So today I'm going to be using my experience of owning a micro bakery for 5 years to kind of help guide your way when you're starting to feel overwhelmed with your micro bakery. So, what is this magic formula that we follow to not feel overwhelmed? Well, to put it simply, what we do is we first start by evaluating the situation, what is making us overwhelmed, and what has become overwhelming in our business model. And then we either invest in the business or we start saying no to certain things. So that seems simple, but each of those things require a lot of thinking, which a lot of times in my business model, I love to do as little thinking as possible. So, my favorite tasks are rolling cinnamon rolls, making icing, the things I love to do and are easy to do. But when your business starts to grow, you have to take the time to think through your problems because your future self will thank you. Once you've sat down, evaluated the problem, and solved it, it will lead to years of happier times, easier times. So, although it feels overwhelming to actually sit down, find the problem, and solve the problem, it is necessary if you want to keep enjoying and having a thriving micro bakery. So, the first step in being able to address the problem, address what is causing you to become overwhelmed, is to first accept that maybe things are getting a little out of hand. Maybe you're getting too many orders. Because a lot of times when we start a business, we don't expect it to just blow up. Maybe you do, but I didn't. I didn't expect people to just graciously open their arms to us, for our community to accept us in, and for us to be flooded with orders. But when that happens, as a small business owner, we oftentimes want to accept every order that we can because we don't know if we're going to continue to get it. We're worried that if we don't accept an order, it may not come again. What this can lead to is things quickly getting out of hand in the kitchen. So maybe you were expecting to have about 20 orders at your bakery, but instead you were happily surprised to see there were 80 orders. But your bakery was set up very well for 20, and now you have 80. You're probably going to feel very overwhelmed trying to make all of those orders. Now, what becomes difficult is finding out where the problems start at the bakery. So, I'm going to give you a few examples of times where we have become overwhelmed at the bakery and what we did to solve that. So, one example of when we started to feel overwhelmed is way back in the beginning, 5 years ago. When we first started getting started, it was COVID time, and what sold really well were cookie decorating kits. When we released our first cookie decorating kit, which is basically just a box with blank sugar cookies, cut out cookies that we made, with 2 bags of icing and some sprinkles so that the kids can pipe them at home, or adults, whoever wanted them, could decorate their own cookies from home, and we gave them all the supplies. We expected to sell maybe 15 or 20, but the first time we released them, we sold 80 boxes. So we had thought we could probably handle 20, and that was pushing it. But we didn't want to turn away any business. We were just getting started. So we accepted 80 orders. And this was just for each week, we got about 80 orders. Um, it became very overwhelming because up until that point, we had primarily been doing cakes for weddings and events and showers. So most of our supplies were geared towards baking cakes, so cake pans, stuff like that. We had about 5 sheet pans for cookies. So what we did is we would roll out our sugar cookies, we would put them onto the pan, and we would put them in the oven. They would bake for about 10 minutes. We would get that sheet pan out, we would take all of the cookies off and put them onto a cooling rack. Then, when the sheet pan had cooled down a little bit, we could re-put on cookie dough once we had rolled it and everything, and then we could put it into the oven and bake it again. The whole process for those 3 pans to get baked was about 20 to 30 minutes. Now, There were a lot of things you could think were the problem in that situation, but we had to step back and think specifically what is holding us back from making more cookies. And the main problem was the amount of pans we had. It was the main cause of us having to pause after each bake. We really should have had our oven filled at all times to be as productive as possible. So, the change we made is we went and we bought a lot more pans. I want to say we bought 12 pans, and then on top of that, we bought a bakery rack that would hold each of those pans. Now, that might seem like a lot of money to invest into your business, but in the end, it allowed us to take on more orders that would quickly pay back any of the money that we invested. It also made the process more seamless and easy on our employees. Or at that time, it was just me, my dad, and Ellen. So it made it easier on us to be able to fulfill our orders. So, what this allowed us to do was someone would be continuously rolling out the cookie dough and cutting out the shapes, and then they would be able to put those shapes onto the pan and stick it onto the rack. Then, every time a pan would come out of the oven, we would simply replace that pan with a new pan, meaning that we could be continuously baking cookies. Another game changer was getting pre cut parchment. This meant we didn't have to have someone cutting out parchment every time we needed a new parchment square. We simply grabbed it and put it on the pan. And it was so quick and it really did make a difference. So, in that case, we evaluated the problem. We realized that it was mostly in pans. The pans were really causing us to not be able to go as quickly as we needed. And so we evaluated that and we decided we needed to invest in our business by getting more pans and a pan rack. So once we were able to invest, things were so much easier. We were continuously making cookies and it didn't feel like we were taking on too many orders. It then felt like an easy amount to do, and um, it really made such a difference in our business. And those people who ordered cookie decorating kits are still coming back today. So I really feel like we made the right call in taking those orders and making it work at our bakery. Another way you invest in your business is investing your time and your energy. So I don't mean just nose to grindstone all the time. So if you are feeling overwhelmed and feeling like you're overworked, sometimes it's valid. Sometimes you are doing too much and you need to find a way to work smarter, not harder. Another example of how important it is to evaluate is by looking at the products that you are selling. So let's say you have been selling a lot of sourdough and you're feeling overwhelmed and feeling like you might consider buying a bread oven. That is the clear next step for those who are wanting to make sourdough microbakeries. However, you may evaluate your sales and see that you're actually making much more money on your cinnamon rolls. And actually, every customer that's getting a loaf of sourdough is also getting cinnamon rolls. And maybe it's actually the cinnamon rolls that are bringing in your customers. Or you may see that your cookies are making more than your sourdough. They're much easier to make. They are actually maybe less, maybe they have a better um profit margin because you're not spending as much time per cookie as you are per loaf of sourdough. So I urge you to go look at my what to sell your micro bakery video because I really explain what gives a item a good profit margin and that it's not just about cost of ingredients but about how much work you put into it, how much you can get into the oven, price per oven load, stuff like that. I encourage you to go look at that video. But you do want to analyze what are you really selling and what is really making you money. And if it's not sourdough, then maybe the next step is not to invest in a sourdough bread oven or a bread oven, but instead to start putting more energy and advertising into your rolls or your cookies, whatever it be. So just be willing and open to really look at what items are making the most profit, maybe taking ones that you're able to do a lot of, and what is it that your customers are really coming to you for. So evaluate with an open mind because you may have gone into this business with your sourdough bread, but it may be something else that is really catching your customers and keeping them coming back. I think a lot of micro bakers today are not maybe having their micro bakery as their full-time job, but because communities are hungry for more bakeries, more made from scratch baked goods, a lot of people who say, "Hey, I'm a baker and I want to bake for my community," are often overwhelmed by the amount of want from their communities. So, if you're someone who thought maybe this will be a nice side gig and then realized that the demand was high, um, it can be overwhelming at first. So I'm gonna tell you a couple ways that we were able to handle it, even though we were starting it as kind of like a side business. So the first is we started to hire help. You're probably unsure, where do I even find help? What I have found is that there's lots of people out there who find your job a dream job when they don't have to take on, the managing of the orders and the stress of having to turn down orders or the stress of, will the bake turn out right? It's actually a very peaceful job that a lot of people are looking for. So I was lucky enough to recently hire my old computer science teacher. He is recently retired and was just looking for a peaceful job that he could enjoy doing each week. And what he does is he comes in and makes all of our cookie dough. He scoops it out onto trays and then he covers those trays and puts them in the freezer. And then I'm able to come in on Friday and Saturday when we're open, put those out onto the trays and bake them directly from frozen. So, as a baker, I think that when we go into opening a micro bakery, we take for granted the social part of owning a micro bakery. And my business model is very much, we have pre-orders and people pick up, but also you can go through the line and pick up stuff. So I do interact a lot with customers. Um, but even if you're just doing porch pickups, there are certain things you bring to the table that you cannot hire out. So when I suggest hiring out things, you definitely want to evaluate what is something that you do that no one else can do. So for me, and this isn't just something that no one else can do. We have really friendly, kind, amazing employees, but I get a lot of excitement. I get a lot of inspiration. I get a lot of motivation by seeing my customers every week. And that is something I don't want to give up. I don't want to give up my Saturday mornings at the case, seeing what people are really interested in and seeing what people are really enjoying that week. So that is something that I will try not to hire out. And I think a lot of people, maybe that's the first thing they go to is hiring out maybe the cash register or the line. But for our business model, that has been something that we've really tried to put high value on is us being able to be there on Saturday mornings, Friday mornings, just so that we can stay connected to our customers because they really are the main reason that we are baking and it is the source of enjoyment for our business. Our source of enjoyment is seeing others enjoying what we have spent all week making. Maybe you evaluated your plan and realized that you are spending too much time on making your cinnamon rolls, or maybe you're realizing you need to be able to fit more loaves of sourdough at a time. So every oven you want to be able to fit more sourdough. Sometimes when we're really close to the problem, we feel like the way we're doing it is the only way it can be done. But often, if you step back and instead invest some time and thought and research into something, you're able to find better ways to do it because a lot of times we've only seen cinnamon rolls maybe done one way. So in the beginning, a lot of people are making their cinnamon rolls in Pyrexes, which if you've put a Pyrex into an oven, you're wasting so much space. You're probably only going to get 12 cinnamon rolls out of that oven load just because you know how to make them in a Pyrex. It's comfortable to make them in the Pyrex. But really, if you had stepped back and you evaluate, is there a better way to do this? Maybe you'll find that if you get a pan that fills more of your oven, you'll see that you're able to get more cinnamon rolls on that pan. Maybe you move your racks around and see that actually I can fit 3 rows of these cinnamon rolls in my oven. And you've taken your oven from being able to make, maybe 24 rolls, 2 Pyrexes, to instead being able to make maybe 72 because you were having Instead, you got pans and you were able to fit 24 per pan and you were able to fit 3 pans. I don't know the math on that. I was probably wrong. But let's say you're able to get 72. Going from 24 rolls per oven load to 72 rolls per oven load is a huge difference in your profits. So be willing to step back, look at um, ways other bakers are doing it. There's so much content on micro bakeries these days. Even just in the shorts section, if you're someone who likes short form content, you can go to Facebook Shorts or YouTube Shorts. Maybe it's called YouTube Shorts and maybe it's Instagram Reels. You can actually search in there and search maybe micro bakery and see what are other people doing, especially sourdough. A lot of sourdough micro bakers are also making content, so be willing to take the time to research other people. How are they doing it? And then also take the time to just think through your processes and how you can make them better, more efficient, and being able to get more baked at one time, more done ahead, stuff like that. Now, I mentioned evaluating, and that once you evaluate, you can take one of two roads. You can either invest in your business, whether that's with your time or actually investing, as in money, buying new equipment, hiring out help. So, those are all ways you can invest in your business. But then there's another road you can take, and that is, I'm just going to say as an overview, saying no to things. So, saying no to things doesn't just mean starting to take less orders. In fact, that's not the first step I would take. What I would do first is look at your menu. Is there anything on your menu that doesn't serve you or that doesn't make a profit or doesn't make a profit compared to the amount of time and energy you're putting into it? So, one example I always think of is when we first started doing pop up sales, Ellen would make these miniature cakes. Like, she would make tiny little cake layers, and they're about that big and that wide, and she would pipe them and intricately decorate each of them. And then we sold them for like $6, which the amounts that we sold, I think we sold like literally four. I mean, this is crazy. I would never ever think that that was a good way to go now. But she was making like four of these just because we wanted to brighten up the case and make it look pretty. But nowadays, I would say you never want to waste time on something when time is the most precious thing you have right now. So if you're somebody who maybe is trying to raise your family and also be having this micro bakery on the side, remember how precious your time is and treat it as such. So if certain items maybe don't make you as much as others, but they're taking the most of your time, be willing to cut your menu. In fact, I would say in the beginning, if you're trying to be able to make plenty of items and you have very popular, like your cinnamon rolls are very popular, maybe your sourdough bread is very popular, I would say only have maybe 5 items on your menu. You don't want a super big menu because instead of making lots of one thing, you're instead making a little bit of each thing. So if your oven, you have figured out the best way to make cinnamon rolls, you're able to fill your oven, you're getting a lot out of each oven load, then you want to make your menu primarily geared towards your cinnamon rolls or maybe another type of roll. Maybe you start doing a blackberry cobbler roll because all of your equipment is geared towards that item. So if you're all set for that item, it's going to be easier for you to crank out more and more of that item than adding in several different items that maybe need different pans, different parchment, different packaging. You want to keep it all consistent. You want a smaller menu so that you can handle more of those items. So that's one way that I would categorize saying no. You're not necessarily like saying no to a customer. You're simply telling yourself, I need to focus on what I can make plenty of, I know I do a great job at, and that I'm able to handle in my micro bakery space, which could be your kitchen, could be a small commercial kitchen. But that's one way that you can evaluate a problem and then say no, being the solution. So minimizing your menu can be a lifesaver. So, the next problem or situation I'm going to explain may not be applicable for everyone, but let's say you are someone who wants to make sure that you're very present for your family right now. So you are maybe a stay-at-home mom, maybe you have 3 kids, and you wanted to start this or you wanted to start your micro bakery to help make a little extra profit for your family. You want to make sure that your mind isn't completely taken up by your bakery. So let's say that is what is making you feel overwhelmed. You're getting lots of orders and you feel like your business is starting to take over your mind. A lot of times, because we hold those things so dearly, so you want to be a present mom and you really want to make sure that your business is not jeopardizing that. When we start to feel overwhelmed, sometimes you can immediately start to think, I've made a mistake. I shouldn't do this. Let's get right out of it. And although maybe that does end up being the solution and you can do what you want, one option is being able to say no to certain things. So maybe that's not just, I need to stop taking so many orders. It may mean that you need to go back on your pickup days. I know that, oh, I think it's called Little Pearl Breads. She is also on YouTube and she makes content and she has a little micro bakery in her house and she also has 2 little kids. I saw recently that she does a pickup twice a month. And I believe most likely when she started doing content and again, I'm speculating here. I don't actually know the situation. I just saw that she was going back on the amount of bread she made and only doing twice a month, which I think is a great business model. If you're able to continuously get lots of orders and make a living, only being open twice a month, then you can definitely do that because it's better for your community to be able to get fresh bread twice a month than for you to quit and completely remove yourself from your microbakery. So remember that although it's not what everyone else is doing, it's an option for you to make it flexible and work for your life, especially if you have customers and a need in your community. So my advice would be when things start to feel overwhelming and you feel like it's taking over your personal life, it's taking over your family's life, be willing to step back and not just give up, but be a little flexible in your thoughts on how do I want to structure my business? Do I need to have it every Saturday? Do I need to be picking up every farmer's market I can? Instead, you could limit it to 1 day a week, once a month, twice a month. The possibilities are endless, especially because people really do want microbakeries in their community. So, I guess I would say, as words of encouragement, there's a lot of people out there who are wanting you to keep up baking. There's people who want freshly baked goods. So, with that in mind, be good to yourself. Be willing to say, I can only handle twice a month. And so that is what I'm going to do. It's not necessarily selfish. It may be the only way that you can continue enjoying and growing your micro bakery. And then there's obviously the basic way of saying no. Sometimes you do just have to say no. So we did stop doing custom orders because we just had a larger quantity of pre-orders. So at our bakery, we offer a pre-order option and we have a very select pre-order menu. So it includes sourdough bread, cinnamon rolls, danishes, scones, in packs of 4. So those types of things. We do not accept custom orders because custom orders just take more time, and that is what we are currently limited on. Right now, our schedules are filled with baking, with packaging, and with prepping for the weekend. So, one thing we had to start saying no to were custom orders, specifically cake orders. We used to be in the wedding cake business and doing and doing cakes for showers. But once we started doing more, um, bakery type items, artisan items like sourdough, cinnamon rolls, danishes, croissants. All of a sudden, our kitchen shifted from being geared towards cakes to being geared towards other things. So, the difference between the supplies you need for cakes versus cinnamon rolls are very different. We no longer have a huge amount of cake pans. We no longer have all the different piping tips and all the different knives used to ice our cakes, turntables. We don't have those things. And those things are necessary to easily be able to pop out lots of custom cake orders. And so we had to let go of our custom cakes to be able to focus on what was more profitable and more enjoyable for us at the time. And that was our cinnamon rolls, croissants, all that stuff. So we did move away from doing custom cakes. And that's one way of saying no. Another experience I had that was a little bit more difficult for me to say no to was we have been doing a gift basket bar for the past 3 years. It is one of my favorite events that we put on. I will include some pictures because I was so proud of this event. Um, so we used to go to a wedding venue. The wedding venue was called French and Farm, and they would allow us to set up booths and put up all these different Christmas baked goods, Christmas baking equipment, local artisans with their candles, their jams, and their homemade ornaments, and all these things. And I really, really enjoyed putting it on. But because it was in the middle of one of our busiest seasons, which is Christmas, obviously we get a lot of cinnamon rolls during the Christmas season. On top of that, I have two toddlers or two young kids. It became clear that this was just not the right time in our business to put on an event that was that large. So we put a lot of time, a lot of energy into this event. And while it did turn out wonderful, it was one of my favorite events that we put on. It was something that I eventually had to say no to. So, like, this year, we're not having it, not because I didn't love it and not because I didn't think it did well, but because right now it was just too much for us. It was too much for our bakery, it was too much for our families. So, I just think that's probably the one example of the hardest thing, for me to say no to was that event, but it was definitely necessary, and going into the holiday season, I'm very excited. I have a lot less on my plate because we're not hosting it, but it was so fun, and I hope that once our children get older and maybe our children even start to help us with our business, maybe that's something that we can re-examine in the future when we are more set up for that. So, one of the last things I wanted to talk about is obviously I'm not a pro. I have been working with alongside Ellen and my dad at this micro bakery for 5 years, but we still are learning. We are still growing. And really, it's growth that kind of usually leads to becoming overwhelmed. So, even right now, and I have discussed this in my videos, I personally am starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed because I have recently taken on doing these videos and then also putting more effort into our blog, the Flour Barn Homestead. So I wanted to say that I invite you on this journey with me a little bit because I'm trying to find ways to stay out of this state of overwhelm. So I do feel like I've conquered the feeling of being overwhelmed with the bakery. I really feel like I've learned how to manage my time there. I've learned what items work on our menu, and I've finally been willing to, hire the people we've needed and found a lot of luck in the hiring process. But now that I'm stepping into this new role as making the through making videos and writing blog posts, now I'm trying to look at my equation and figure out how do I conquer this feeling of overwhelm. So, in the coming weeks, I'm going to be working on solutions to this. So, one of the ways I'm trying to become less overwhelmed with the blog is by hiring out things that don't need me. So, I'm hiring someone to maybe work on my Pinterest pins, which for those of you who are in the blogging world, one way to promote your recipes and your blogging articles is to post on Pinterest. So every day I try to post 5 times to Pinterest. So one of the ways I'm trying to feel a little less overwhelmed with that is by finding someone else to do that because I don't feel like anyone else can create the recipes, obviously, and I like to be in charge of taking the pictures and obviously writing the post. So I'm trying to find things that I am willing to let go of, and I will keep you updated if I'm able to figure that out more. I also am just trying to educate myself more on blogging. So, because I'm new to this, I'm not really even sure what opportunities are out there for blogging or um, I'm not sure how to work smarter, not harder at this point because I just don't know enough about it. So I'm currently booked to go on a blogging conference in Boston in a week. So I'm excited to hopefully learn more about blogging, understand the game a little bit better. So I will keep you updated on that, and hopefully that will help me feel a little less overwhelmed by the blog. Another thing I'm doing are these YouTube videos. And while it has overwhelmed me a little bit just in learning to edit and making the time to film, stuff like that, it's also something I have found so much joy in. It's like at the bakery. The thing I enjoy the most is Saturdays when people come in and I get to see the customers, talk to the customers. What I didn't expect through YouTube is how much of a connection I've been able to make with other micro bakers. Because a lot of times, if you're a micro baker, there's probably not like 10 other micro bakeries in your area. And if there are, you're probably not best friends with those people. Maybe you are. Maybe you have a very good relationship with them. But when I go on YouTube or on Instagram and talk about my micro bakery, I'm able to connect with micro bakers from like Colorado or Washington or even just Michigan. And that has been really fun because we talk the same language, and it's just been so enjoyable to be able to talk with fellow micro bakers or even just people who love to bake or see similarities in our lives. I just have been able to connect with so many more people than I expected, and it has been such a treat. So I guess what that has taught me is that sometimes things that overwhelm you are just ways of showing you that things are going really well. So, when things are going really well in your business, that's probably when you're going to start becoming overwhelmed because that means that you do have to stop for a second, you have to evaluate, and you have to make a solution to that problem. But also take a moment to realize what that means for you. Maybe you're overwhelmed because you get 80 orders of sourdough and you're like, how am I going to do this in my kitchen? Well, take a moment to realize the good about it because you're overwhelmed. That means something really good just happened. It means you have 80 customers who came to you for their sourdough bread. And most likely, if they enjoy your sourdough bread, they will be returning customers. So every time you do feel that feeling of overwhelm, I encourage you to go through the steps and solve your problem before it gets out of hand. But also, I want you to reflect on why are you feeling overwhelmed and what good is happening in your business. So for me right now, although I am feeling a little bit overwhelmed, and it's totally manageable amount of overwhelmed, um, but that means that my business is growing in a new direction. I really enjoyed the direction it's going. I've found new things out about myself. I've found new things that I love, and for me, that has just been so exciting. So while it can be stressful to be overwhelmed, sometimes being overwhelmed is actually a good thing. So, because I'm a bit of a blabber, I'm just going to summarize this video real quick. So, if you are a business owner, specifically in my case, I own a bakery, and you're starting to feel overwhelmed, for us, the simplest way to find a solution is to start by evaluating the problem. So, why are you feeling overwhelmed? Is it because you're getting more orders? And why is it hard to fulfill those orders? What is causing it to be difficult for your kitchen to produce the amount of orders that you're getting? Usually, it's a very specific problem that is maybe causing a lot of issues in your kitchen. In our case, sometimes it's pans, sometimes it's needing a bigger mixer. Um, but you want to evaluate what is the problem? What is it taking me? What is becoming difficult for me to fulfill my orders? Then you will either invest in your business or say no to something. So you can either invest money, maybe you need to buy more equipment, maybe you need to hire someone, or maybe you just need to invest your time in coming up with solutions or systems in your bakery. So that might mean coming up with a better way to make your sourdough loaves, coming up with a better way to bake them, a better way to roll your cinnamon rolls, a more consistent way to package. That takes time, that takes thought, and that is something you may need to be investing into your business. Another thing, like I mentioned, is saying no. This might mean limiting your menu. It might mean saying no to certain opportunities, and it might mean just stepping back and offering less hours for your business. So, thank you for watching. If you guys have any questions, be sure to comment below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, The Flour Barn Homestead. And if you're looking for more recipes or tips on baking, be sure to check out theflourbarnhomestead.com. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you soon.